Yo, I got a bunch of outlets. If you guys want to learn everything there is to know about outlets, from how to select the right outlet, to how to wire the outlet correctly, to even knowing what these little tabs or ears are for. If you guys want to step up your DIY game and you want to learn about everything there is to know, stay with me in this video. We're going to talk about it all. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Today I decided to do a video about outlets, and I figured I'd break it down for you guys because I know the first time I got into DIY electrical, outlets were kind of like a daunting thing and I wasn't sure basically where to start. So I'm going to try and break it down for you as simple as possible that I can, so that whenever you guys have to replace an outlet or install a new outlet, you guys will be armed with all the information that you need to tackle these projects. In order to make this thing go as smoothly as possible, I'm going to break this thing up into segments, and I'm going to leave timestamps below so you guys can jump from segment to segment depending on which area you're interested in and what area you're lacking the knowledge in. Everything that I use here, I'll leave in the description so you guys can find them if you guys are interested in using any of the same things here. I'm not sponsored in this video. I bought all this stuff by myself, and it's stuff that I've accumulated over the years and tools that I've used throughout my time and working with them. So we'll talk about it. Now, let's break this video down. I'm going to talk to you guys about the segments. One, the different type of receptacles you have, 15 amp versus 20 amp. How to wire an outlet, whether you're going to use speed wiring or backstabbing, back wiring, side wiring, or a newer style of wiring that's come out and is taking over the DIY game. We'll talk about that as well. I'm also going to talk to you guys about how to strip your wires, the correct length to strip your wires. And then I'm going to talk to you guys about all the different type of outlets that you may come across whenever you're doing DIY projects or projects in general, including residential outlets, commercial outlets, GFCI outlets, tamper resistant outlets, as well as the new Decora edge outlets, which seem to be taking over the whole DIY game. We'll talk about them all, and I'll tell you the pros and cons, which ones I prefer, so that you guys are armed with all the knowledge that you can, so that whenever you decide to tackle a project, you're good to go. We'll also talk about how to install the outlets in your boxes, whichever box you decide to use, and we'll talk about these little tabs, what the purposes are, and how you can use them to your advantage whenever you're installing these outlets. Finally, we'll wrap up the video talking about some hidden features included in most outlets, and I'll also talk to you guys about the tools that I use and some of the tools that you're going to come across that are going to make installing receptacles and outlets super easy, and it's going to take a lot of the hassle out of your hands. All right, without further ado, let's jump into this video and let's talk about it. So whenever you guys decide to do the wiring of an electrical outlet, whether it's the installation of a new one or you're replacing an old one, there are two types of outlets and sizes that you need to consider. For example, I have two outlets here and they may look pretty much the same. However, there's a big difference. One of them is a 15 amp and one of them is a 20 amp. So whenever you're doing outlets, that's the first thing you need to consider. Are you going to be installing a 15 amp or a 20 amp? Now, there are several ways for you guys to know what outlet you're going to need to do. The first is you can look at the outlet if you're replacing one. So typically on the outlet itself, you're going to see the name, whether it's 15 amp or 20 amp. So if you're replacing one, just look at your outlet, it should tell you. If for any reason you're replacing an outlet and there's not one and you want to know what size you should use, the next thing I suggest is go to your breaker panel. Look at the breaker that controls the circuit that you're trying to tap into, and it should say 15 amp or 20 amp. If it's a 20 amp, you're going to go with a 20 amp outlet. If it's a 15 amp, you go with a 15 amp outlet. The last method that you can use to check it out is look at the wiring. Now, this is 12 gauge wiring, this is 14 gauge wiring. So for any 20 amp circuit, you're going to go with 12 gauge wire, which is a little bit thicker. Or if it's 15 amp, you can go with 14 gauge. So when you pull your outlet out, you should be able to look at the gauge of the wire and tell if it's 12 gauge, you know you got a 20 amp. And if it's 14 gauge, you got a 15 amp. So now that we've identified whether we got a 15 amp or a 20 amp, how are we going to wire these things? Let me talk to you guys about the basics of wiring up any outlet that you come across. They're going to be the same 99% of the time, and it's pretty simple. If you follow these steps, you'll never get it wrong. If you take a look at your outlet, you're going to notice that there are 3 holes on here. And each one of these holes are very important and they serve a distinct purpose. Now, if you look at the outlet itself, you'll notice that one terminal is smaller, one is bigger, and one is round. And the way this works is you'll always have a hot side, which is where your power comes in, a neutral side, which is where your power returns to your breaker or your panel, and a ground, which grounds your outlet and protects it. Now, corresponding to each side, you'll notice on this side here, we got the gold terminals, which are on the same side as the hot terminal. The other side, we have our silver terminals, which correspond to our neutral. And this terminal here corresponds to the ground screw, which is typically set off to one side. And the way I like to remember it so I don't forget, hot is only 3 letters, it's the shortest one. So that's always the smallest port. And then you have your neutral, which is opposite to it, and your ground is always in the middle. So now that you understand how to wire up the outlet and what wire goes where, we're going to talk about the methods of wiring this outlet. Now, as you can see in front of me here, I have several sets of outlets, and they all have different capabilities. The first type of wiring I'm going to talk to you guys about is speed wiring. Now, if you notice, on speed wiring, this is usually on residential grade outlets, and as you can see here, we have some holes in the back of our outlet. This is called speed wiring or backstabbing. Now, I'll tell you guys first and foremost, this is the method I use the least, and I'll tell you why. Now, it may be quick, especially for DIYers, because as you can see, there are holes here. So if you wanted to wire this up, if you wanted to connect your hot wire, you would just insert it into the hole on the back of the outlet, like that. And the wire would just be held in place. However, over time, they've been found that these wires actually can become loose and they may wiggle out over time and cause arcing. So backstabbing or speed wiring is the first type of wiring that you may have. The second type of wiring is back wiring. And as you can see here, this outlet, there's a plate attached to the terminal screws, and sometimes these plates are further back. And what it is you can slide the wire behind the plate, and then you can go ahead and tighten down the screw. And now this gives a secure connection. Personally, this is my favorite method because it allows me to wire it up neat, just like the backstabbing. However, having this screw tightened down here is a much more secure fastening way, and you're less likely to worry about having the wires slip out over time. The next method we're going to talk about is side wiring, which over the years used to be the standard that every outlet was wired like this. And to be honest, it's probably the next best option. It's a little bit more tedious because you have to make J-hooks to put around these terminals, but once you know how to do them, you're going to get a secure connection. So for side wiring, you're going to have a J-hook like this, and your J-hook is going to pass around your terminal, and then you'll be able to secure your terminal down and lock it into place. The one thing you want to make sure is you want to make sure that your J-hook goes in a clockwise direction around your screw. So as you're tightening down your screw, you're pulling in and you're pulling that wire in closer to you and tighten it around. There's so many times that I've seen people try to just push the cable in and tighten it, and over time the wire comes out. So make sure you get a good hook if you decide to use side wiring. Next up on the list is a DIYer's favorite. These things are called Decora edge outlets, and they use a lever system. Similar on the back, you'll see here like backstabbing, they look the same. However, they operate much better. As you can see, we have our neutral terminals on one side, our hot on this side, and our ground to this side. And they work pretty much by lifting up the lever, sliding your wire in, and then closing your lever. And you got your wire nice and tight. This is new to the market. It's been out, I think it's been out a year now, maybe a little bit more, but a lot of DIYers like these outlets because of the way you can wire them super quick, and they used to only be in 15 amp, and now they've come out with a new series that have 20 amps. So they're making their rounds, and a lot of DIYers and a lot of people I see now are using these lever systems on their outlets. Which leads me to my next topic, which is stripping your wires. Now, a lot of people have asked me, hey Dean, When I'm installing my wires, how much do I need to strip my wires? And I always tell them, hey, the manufacturer will tell you. So what I want you guys to do is whenever you're wiring up your wires, you want to look on the back of your outlets, and you can see here, like on this GFCI, right here, you see this strip gauge. That tells me that you need to strip this much wire to use with this outlet. Likewise, on this outlet here, you'll see here, we have another strip gauge, which tells me I need to strip that much wire to use in this outlet. On this one here, we have another strip gauge here. It's located on the side, and it tells you, just measure, and this is how much you need to strip for this one. Likewise here, we have another strip gauge here, tells you here. And even on the Decora edge outlets, we have a strip gauge here. It tells you we need that much to strip. There are a couple things to know when you're stripping wires. One, whatever the strip gauge is that you need to strip these wires, it corresponds to the insertion of the wires. So whether it's the GFCI, the speed wiring, the back wiring, or the lever wiring, the strip gauge will tell you how to do it whenever you're inserting it. Now I'm going to give you a caveat in a second. So this strip gauge is if you're going to insert this wire in the back here. This strip gauge here is if you're going to use speed wiring. This strip gauge here is if you're going to use back wiring. This strip gauge here, obviously, of course, it's only the lever system, is if you're going to insert it in the back of the outlet as well. This one, you notice here, there's no speed wiring or any back wiring. This one only uses side wiring. So this strip gauge will apply for making your wire stripped to put around the screws in the side. Now, what if I wanted to use side wiring on any one of these outlets? You can do it as well. My rule of thumb is you want to strip about 3/4 to 1 inch of wiring, which will be the perfect, which will give you the perfect amount of wiring needed to do side wiring. Now remember, one thing I want you to note, whenever you're stripping your wire and you have the desired length, you need to look on your wire strippers. If you're using one like this, you're going to have to look for the gauge wire that you're using. In this case, I'm using 14 gauge. You want to put it in, and this is important. Once you squeeze down, you want to push with your free hand against the pliers and just pull straight out. And that's how you get a good stripped wire. Don't rock it back and forth because you'll end up nicking the wire, and that can lead to problems in the long run. Alternatively, if you have one of these new wire strippers, you can set the gauge depth of how much wire to be stripped, especially if you're doing a lot of wiring at the same time, and you just insert your wire in and it will strip it for you just like that. So now that you guys have mastered selecting your outlets, selecting the gauge wiring, wiring up your outlets, you guys got it covered, right? And if you guys are enjoying the content so far, please guys, hit that like button, give me a thumbs up. I really enjoy doing this for you guys, and it definitely helps out the channel. Now that we understand all the different types of wiring methods that we can use, let's talk about the outlets themselves. I'm going to talk to you guys about the cheapest and work my way all the way up so you guys can understand what you're getting into and what the grade of outlets are out there on the market. The first type of outlet out there on the market is going to be a typical residential grade outlet. And these come in obviously 15 amp and 20 amp variants. You can choose whichever one you want. But typically your residential grade are going to be your lowest quality. They're going to be the cheapest, and they're going to be the one that has usually the speed wiring and side wiring. For a little bit extra money, I like to step up to the next grade, which is the commercial grade, which again, they come in 15 amp and 20 amp. But as you can see here, the next option that they have are the back wiring. And for most of my residential projects, this is my base. I'll always choose the commercial grade over the residential grade just because it's a little bit sturdier and better build quality. And for the extra buck or two that it costs for this, I would definitely suggest going with a commercial grade outlet. The next type of outlet you're going to come across is your GFI outlet. Now, where do you use your GFI outlets? Typically, where you're going to want to use this is when in scenarios that you want to protect your outlets, like if you have it in a kitchen or in a bathroom near water sources, where you don't want to have to, where you want to protect the circuit for any faults that may interrupt the power. So usually you'll find this on outdoor circuits, in bathrooms, or anywhere where there's moisture and stuff like that. Or you have appliances that plug in. So typically kitchens, bathrooms, outdoors, you'll find these. Now GFI outlets, you'll notice that they're labeled again. You have the hot side here and you have the neutral side here and you have your ground, just like we spoke about. However, you'll see these, most of them will come with this tape around it. And the reason why it's covered is because you only remove this if you want to protect additional circuits down the line. If you wire it just as it is, whatever is plugged into here will be protected and you'll be able to have it. You'll see here, you'll have a test button and a reset button. So whatever device is plugged in to this outlet will be protected. However, if you want to protect other outlets along the way and you're wiring multiple outlets, you're going to remove this tape and you'll see another neutral and another hot here, which will go to your next outlet down the road and so on and so forth. And that way you'll be able to protect outlets further down the stream. Again, you'll be able to find GFIs in 15 amp and 20 amp. So depending on which size circuit you need, you'll have a GFI for you. Next, we're going to talk about the Decora Edge outlets. So you'll also find these outlets with 20 amp and 15 amp variations, and they come in the Duplex style or the Decora style. DIYers are going crazy about these. Why? Because they're so easy to install, and now that they come in 20 amp variant, you're going to see these installed a lot more frequently than you would your commercial grade. For my purposes and what I tell people, if you're just getting into DIY electrical, this might be an easy ease into it, but I would suggest this one or the commercial grade one is the one I would go for. They also now have a GFI variant as well. So as you can see, this must have been a hit because there are a lot more of these are coming out now where you can get different styles and different amperages, including GFIs. Next up on the list is not particularly a style of outlet, however, it's a security feature. If you notice here inside of these outlets, they have some plastic coverings, which these outlets are tamper resistant outlets. Now, tamper resistant outlets are designed for if you have kids or you have a sensitive area that you don't want to get things plugged in, especially if you have little ones running around, tamper resistant outlets may be an option for you. As you can see here, we have these plastic tabs in, and the way it works is you won't be able to plug anything in unless both of these are depressed at the same time, which means you need to plug a device in and depress these at the same time for it to work. That way nobody can stick anything in here because the plastic covering won't retract and you won't be able to get anything in here. Again, we have this in 20 amp and 15 amp variations, so whichever one you want to choose, it's up to you. Another thing to note about tamper resistance outlets are, if you notice here, this one has a T. And the reason why this one has a T is you can tell the difference between this one and this one. This one is 20 amp, this one is 15 amp. So if you see a tamper resistant outlet that has the plastic inserts here and it has a T, you'll automatically know that this one is your 20 amp. Just a FYI, thought I'd bring that up. A lot of people ask me about it, and this is an easy way for me to tell just by looking at an outlet whether it's a 20 amp or not. Also, on another note, you'll also hear people talking about Decora or Duplex. All that is the style of outlet. If you notice here, this one here is rectangular and this one has two oval shapes. This style outlet is your Duplex and this is your Decora. Now let's talk about installing your outlet. Now, depending on what scenario you have, you may have one of these boxes in your wall, you may have a metal box in your wall, or you may have one of these old work boxes in your wall. Installing these things, there are a couple nuances that you need to know. One of the things that you need to know is they'll always have these little screws with them. And these screws go into your outlet and then they screw into the box. And these screws like this are typically installed on your outlet. As you can see here, I removed this just so I could show you. However, your outlet will go in like this and your screws will go into your box like this and secure your outlet in place. Now, one of the things you need to know is every scenario is different. You may have a box that's recessed and your drywall, instead of it being flush with your drywall here, your drywall may be out a little bit, which doesn't allow your outlet to go further in. And as a result, these screws may be too short. Just for you guys to know, Even though the screws that come with the outlet may be short, you can always purchase more. As you can see here, I have a pack that I keep with me because I change outlets so often, but you can pick this up at Home Depot. And the size of these screws are number 6 and they're 32 thread count. And as you can see here, we have a bunch of different sizes. So if you need longer screws, you can pick them up. They're not hard to find. You get them at Home Depot. Just as an FYI and a little tip for you guys, if you guys have a screw that's too long and you guys have a pair of these wire strippers, you'll see some holes on your wire strippers here. What those are for screws, and your screw in, and once you get it to the size that you want, all you need to do is squeeze down and you can cut your screw off just like that if you need to adjust it. Just an FYI for you to know, you can always adjust your screws. Another thing that you'll notice is on most of your outlets, you're going to have tabs. On this outlet, we have tabs here and a little one on this side, tabs here. And what those tabs do is once you install it on your box, typically they're used to mount flush so that your outlet is flush with your box. As you can see here, this one is flush. Now, in some scenarios, like this box, for example, if you were to mount your outlet here, it's not flush because there's a little gap, if you can see it here, that's recessed. So sometimes metal boxes will have this recession as well in their box. And what that means is, in order for you to get your outlet flush, what you want to do is go ahead and break off the tabs. And usually you can just use your wire strippers or a pair of pliers and break off these tabs. And once the tabs are broken off, you'll be able to see that your outlet will sit flush right in the gap here between this in the box, and you'll have a nice flush finish to install your screws. A lot of people wonder why they have those breakaway tabs, but that's for the reasoning. In short, these little ears are meant for you to have a clean, flush install on your outlets. So the next time you go to install an outlet, check it. Make sure that your ears aren't sticking out and causing your outlet to protrude too far or having them bend or bow whenever you do the installation. Just a little tip for you guys. All right, now we're going to talk about my favorite part, which are some built-in features to your outlets and some tips that I want to give you guys whenever you decide to tackle projects where outlets are concerned. The first thing I want to talk to you guys are about these speed wiring outlets. Now, if you notice on your outlet here, you obviously have the port where you're going to install your wire here. But right below that, you'll see here, there is a little slot. Sometimes it's a slot and sometimes it's a smaller hole right here. What that is a release for your speed wiring. The purpose for this is if you ever have a wire inserted into your outlet like that, if you ever want to release this wire, you can use either a piece of wire or a small screwdriver and insert it into that slot there, and you'll be able to pull your wire out. The next tip on your outlet is you'll see these tabs located here, as well as on the side for the neutral. What this is it's a tab that separates your outlet, the top from the bottom. If you have your outlet wired and you have your hot going to this terminal, let's say for example from a light switch, and you want constant power on the bottom, but you want the light switch up here, what you would do is you would connect your other hot lead to this one and your switch to the top outlet here, and then you would break this tab. Typically, you can break this tab by using a pair of pliers, needle nose. You would just grab a hold of it and bend it back and forth until the tab splits off, and then you'll be able to separate your circuits. Usually you have them on most of them. You can see them here on this tamper resistant outlet, and you even have them on the Decora edge outlet here. You can see here, this tab, you will just lift it up and you'll be able to break that tab underneath as well. Another built-in feature that I talked to you guys about was the strip gauge. As you can see here, most outlets have the strip gauge built into their outlets that will tell you exactly how much wire to strip. So whenever you're doing it, you don't have to think about it. The amount of wire that you need to strip is indicated on your outlet, and you should be good to go. The last tip I want to talk to you guys about relates to side wiring. Whenever you guys use side wiring, and I see this all the time, as you can see, you know, this wire is wound around the side, the terminal here. I'll notice sometimes that when you look at the outlet, all these other terminals are sticking out. What I would suggest is whenever you're installing, even if you're using side wiring, you want to go around and go around all the unused terminals and tighten those screws all the way down. This may seem trivial, however, doing this could save you, because if you notice, if these terminals stick out and you have a hot wire connected here, this terminal is also hot. And if you have a metal box and you're trying to insert this into your box and it touches the metal box, you get the idea. You're going to have an arc and you're going to have a spark, and you may trip a breaker or two, and it's not going to be pleasant. So tighten those screws up as my last tip, or whenever you install electrical outlets. All right, the last thing I want to talk to you guys about are wire strippers. Obviously, if you're installing outlets, you're going to have wire strippers, and as you can see here, I have a bunch of different ones I've collected throughout the years, and I probably have a ton more that I use all the time. I just grab one and I keep one in my bag. You'll notice that some of them are similar and some of them are different. One of the things I want to talk to you about is your standard wire stripper. You guys see these all the time. These are my go-tos. I'll keep one of these in my bag. This one is beaten up, but it works well. And your standard wire stripper is going to have the most features, and you probably want to keep at least one of these with you. Why? You'll be able to tell, typically on one side, you'll have a side for solid core wire and a side for stranded wire. This will tell you what gauge wire, and you can strip them here, as well as they'll have an end where you can pinch to make a J-hook. Again, they'll also have holes here where you can thread different size screws in. This says 6 32nd, you have 10 32nd, and again, this will help you whenever you're installing screws, you can cut them. I have this style. Also, I have another heavy duty one here. This one's a little bit stronger that I use. Again, you'll see the same thing. One side for solid core, one side for stranded wire. And again, I have a better pair of pliers on the end that I can use to grip, to bend, to make my J-hooks or whatever I need. As well as having the holes here to cut screws, and having a blade here as well if I need to cut my wire and do any work on it like that. So you'll have your two standard wire strippers. Now, the next one that you'll have is a ratcheting style like this one. This one has a crimper and it has a blade, but I use this sometimes. It's quick. If I have a lot of wires that I'm stripping, I can set this gauge to whatever depth that I want, put my wires in, boom, strip it, and it's good to go. So these work well. And I have this style of ratcheting wire as well. Again, it has a blade so you can cut wires, and it has the feature again where you can set the gauge, put your wire in, and you'll be able to strip it just like that. Similar to the ratcheting style. Again, this one is handy. I usually keep this one in my bag sometimes too. That way I have options whenever I'm out and about, and if I need to strip multiple wires, I'm good to go. Last but not least, we want to talk about the screwdrivers. If you guys are installing outlets, you're going to have either a drill or a screwdriver, but you get to realize real fast that these screws, they are Phillips, but they're not. There's a little hidden trick, especially on the terminals here. If you notice inside the terminal, it looks like there's a square inside the Phillips, where a lot of people will use either a slotted screwdriver or a flathead, and they'll tighten this down. However, I like to use a ECX bit, and if you can tell here, it's like a combination of a flathead with a square screwdriver. Now your standard square, which a lot of electricians use, are called a Robertson bit, which is just a square bit. I have this tool from Klein, and included in here is an actual Robertson bit. It just looks like a little square bit, but this bit fits directly in to my terminals here. As you can see, it's a good fit to tighten, and you can use the Robertson. However, I find that the combination bit works perfect. Now, with this bit, you'll be able to get down into your terminal and you'll screw it, and you can get a lot of torque to tighten this thing down super tight. So if you're doing a lot of electrical work, get yourself one of these. This is a 16-in-1, but Klein makes a bunch of them. You can get just an ECX bit. Having one of these is going to save you. Trust me. Once you use this, you're not going to want to use a Phillips screwdriver again. I hope watching this video helped you out a lot and opened up your eyes to wiring and installing outlets. If it did, great. Don't forget, give me a thumbs up. I'm going to be talking a little bit more in future videos about light switches, multimeters, a lot more electrical DIY videos. I got a lot of comments asking me certain questions and things about that, and I thought I'm going to do a series on all things electrical DIY, including doing some more installs. So guys, listen, we covered everything from the new Leviton Decora Edge outlets with the lever system. We talked about different boxes. We talked about different ratcheting wire strippers. We talked about your standard strippers, different screwdrivers. We talked about the different screws that you're going to use for your install. We talked about the different gauges, the different gauge wiring that you're going to come across. With that, I'm pretty sure you have everything covered. Now, you can go back and use this video for reference, but just remember, starting out, it's pretty simple. All you really need to do when you're starting out is select whether you want what style outlet, whether you want a duplex or a Decora, 15 amp or 20 amp, whether you want to go with speed wiring, back wiring, a commercial grade outlet or a residential grade, or a GFCI, or one of these new Leviton Decora Edge outlets. Whichever one you choose, I'm sure after watching this, you guys are going to be armed with the knowledge to do any install. If you haven't checked out my videos, you can check them out where I actually go over the installation of an outlet. I'm going to be doing more I'm going to be doing more of these installation videos, so you'll be able to follow along and understand once I start talking about, you know, little tips and tricks about using wire nuts and all this other stuff. But again, that's for another video. Right now, I just wanted to arm you guys with the knowledge of installing outlets and everything that you may come across. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys found value in this. And if you did, don't forget, give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, I'll catch you guys in the next video.